So when it comes to a nation's economy, who do you actually trust? I mean, what happens when you get two official reports from two opposing political parties and they paint wildly different pictures of the very same country? That's the economic puzzle we're going to break down today.
Okay, so on one side, you have this story of a resilient, strong, and growing economy. But on the other, a completely different narrative of fragility and decline. We're going to dive right into the heart of this debate, looking at the key arguments and counter-arguments. And our main guide here is the government's rebuttal document, the one titled Indian Economy, Resilient, Strong, and Growing, which, you guessed it, directly challenges that more pessimistic take from the opposition.
Right. So what we're looking at here isn't just some dry economic analysis. I mean, the source document itself makes it super clear on its cover. It's a factual counter to a negative report. This is a really high-stakes debate about India's economic reality, where, every single data point becomes part of a much bigger story.
And honestly, this quote from the document, it sets the tone perfectly. Its whole purpose, right from the get-go, is to systematically dismantle the arguments made by its political rival. It's basically saying they've cherry-picked data to create this misleading doomsday picture. So let's unpack their side of the story, starting with the biggest number in economics.
All right, first up, the main event, the GDP growth debate. The first major battleground is, of course, the big one, gross domestic product, or GDP. It's that headline number everyone looks at to get a quick read on a country's economic health.
So the core question that critics are asking, and the one this rebuttal tackles head-on, is pretty simple. Is India's impressive 7+% GDP growth figure for real? The opposition is essentially saying, these numbers, they just don't pass the smell test. And right there, that's the central disagreement. The opposition claims the numbers are built on a really shaky foundation, full of data gaps. But the government's rebuttal fires right back, saying that whole view is just outdated. They argue the entire system for calculating GDP has been modernized, making it more accurate than it's ever been.
So, how exactly does the rebuttal defend the data? Well, it gets into the weeds. It says the methodology has fundamentally changed. We're not talking about old survey models anymore. The claim is that GDP is now linked to real-time high-frequency data, stuff from the National Tax Network and corporate filings. The whole point is that this new data gives a much more accurate, ground-level view of the economy, and it can catch all these shifts that the older methods would have just completely missed.
Okay, so a high GDP number should, in theory, inspire confidence, right? But the opposition says, hold on a second. They argue that two key indicators, the currency and foreign investment, are telling a very different story. So let's get into that.
You hear this a lot. Critics will point to a tumbling rupee and say, see, that's a sign of fundamental economic weakness. The argument is pretty straightforward. A weakening currency means the economy is in trouble.
But as you might expect, the rebuttal document has a totally different take. It argues the rupee isn't just operating in a vacuum. Its value is shaped by these huge global forces, and that India's strong domestic reserves are actually acting like a pretty powerful shield.
So here's the key point the document makes. This isn't really an Indian problem. It's a strong US dollar problem. Think about it. When there's a lot of uncertainty in the world, where does money go? It flocks to the safety of the US dollar. That high demand pushes its value way up. And since currencies are always traded in pairs, a stronger dollar just automatically makes other currencies, like the rupee, look weaker by comparison. It's happening to a lot of major economies, not just India.
Okay, so the currency story is a bit more complicated than it looks. But what about foreign investment? Is confidence actually falling? Is that money still coming in?
Well, the document's answer to that question is pretty blunt. It comes in the form of one single massive number, $71 billion. That's the gross foreign direct investment, or FDI, that it says flowed into India in 2024, and that's according to UNCTAD. And it's not just any investment. The document is quick to point out that this money is flowing into key growth areas: services, manufacturing, R&D. The takeaway they want you to have is pretty clear. From their point of view, long-term global investors are still very much interested in the India story. Now, beyond just foreign money, the debate also gets into how much India is investing in itself. And that's measured by something called Gross Fixed Capital Formation, or GFCF. Yeah, it sounds super complicated, but it's really not. It's basically just a count of all the money being invested in productive, long-term stuff like factories, machinery, and infrastructure. It's a really key sign of a healthy, growing economy. And this is where the rebuttal makes a really crucial distinction. It admits, yeah, okay,
investment as a share of GDP might have been higher at some points in the past. But, it argues, those past investment booms were fueled by a ton of unsustainable debt. The claim today is that investment is built on clean bank and corporate balance sheets, much healthier foundations. And that, they say, makes it way more sustainable for the long haul. All right, so even if the big top-line numbers are looking strong and investment is healthy, it all leads to maybe the most important question for any economy. Who is actually benefiting from all this? Is this growth really reaching everyone?
And here we go again with another stark contrast. The opposition's claim is that the economic growth has been basically cornered by the top 1%, leaving pretty much everyone else behind. But the rebuttal says that view is just fundamentally wrong because it completely ignores something they call the social wage.
So what on earth is the social wage? Well, the document defines it as the value of all these huge government welfare transfers. We're talking about things like free food for 800 million people, subsidized housing, healthcare coverage. You get the idea. The argument is simple. If you don't factor these benefits into the equation, you're just not getting a true picture of how well a household is actually doing. And they really zero in on policies like the subsidized housing scheme. They frame it not just as a government expense, but as a direct transfer of a physical asset, an actual house, to lower-income families. And when you do that, they argue, you're fundamentally boosting the wealth of the entire bottom 50% of the population. The rebuttal also takes on that whole issue of rising household debt. It counters the idea that this is a sign of distress. Instead, it says it's a sign of aspiration, of a growing middle class. It points out that most of this credit isn't just for spending, it's for creating assets, like buying homes and vehicles. So you can see where this is going. In the end, what we really have are two fundamentally different stories being told about the exact same economy. One is a story of sustainable, inclusive growth. The other, a story of fragile, unequal expansion. And that brings us right back to the core puzzle, doesn't it? It's not just about which numbers are technically right, it's about which framework you use to look at them. I mean, do you tell the story of the economy through GDP growth and investment? Or do you tell it through household wealth and social support? And that leaves us with the final, big question. In any complex economy like this one, numbers can be twisted to support totally different arguments. So when the data itself becomes the battlefield, how do you decide which one of these stories is actually closer to the truth?